Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. Second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy McCarraher, author, speaker, and publisher, and each week I talk to men and women who've lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit follow and subscribe. Today, I'm talking to Helen Bligh, who started her career as an NHS dietitian and is now a woman on a mission to change the conversation around obesity, GLP-1 weight loss, and women's health. After working in the NHS, Helen took her life sciences, psychology and training expertise into the private sector, working with a range of pharmaceutical companies until her third redundancy allowed her to start her own business in 2017. Then in 2025, she daringly pivoted her career and has her first book being released this year at the age of 60. Helen now combines professional expertise and up-to-date science with lived experience to challenge outdated narratives around willpower, shame, and weight loss. Hello, Helen. Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Lucy. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'd like to start at the beginning with childhood. Obviously, it's a pivotal time for everybody, and I often discover that people have quite substantial reinventions in their childhood. So what were you like as a child? Where did you grow up? What was your environment like? And
I never even really thought of being married, but I just knew I wanted to be a mum. But career-wise, I never had any major dream. I did sciences. I loved sciences, but wasn't very good at physics and maths. So I ended up doing 2 science A-levels and 1 language. And my mum suggested dietetics. And I'd always loved being in the kitchen with cooking and baking and things like that. So, and making a difference to people was something that was important to me as well. So that was the degree that I chose to do then.
so did you always combine the scientific side of cooking and nutrition in your head? Did you always feel like it was a science as well as an
Well, you
art and a
needed
pleasure?
science A-levels to do that. Yes, because it's nutrition, biochemistry, physiology. It's all grounded in sciences as well as psychology and sociology and food science. There's loads. There's loads of components to being a dietitian. It is a fascinating degree. So I'm really pleased I did it.
Did you go to university in another place than your family home, or did you stay at home while you were
I
studying?
did. I grew up in the Northwest, Cheshire as it was then, Greater Manchester as it is now, and only went over the Pennines to Leeds, Polytechnic as it was then, because it was a vocational course. So, you did 2 years at Leeds, and then we went and did 4 different placements around the country in kitchens, in dietetic departments, catering management, and I did an industrial one as well, and then back for our 4th year. So, yeah, it was a nice mixture.
What job did you get when you came away so well qualified?
I stayed in Leeds. I worked at LGI, Leeds General Infirmary, in their dietetic department to begin with. So it's a great teaching hospital. I can even remember some of the ward numbers that I worked on. So I worked on different wards, outpatients and out in the community as well as training new dietitians. And I would see patients who were admitted on the acute cardiac ward after they'd had a heart attack. Then a few months later, I would see them, or it might even have been weeks, I would see them on the surgical ward because they were having a bypass because they'd had the heart attack. Then I'd see them in a rehab clinic where they're building their confidence that actually, you're not confined by angina and stuff like that anymore. You can actually really begin to live your life. And these are the foods. But then I'd see them a few months later in outpatients because they'd put on weight. And so what was happening when they were admitted after their heart attack, they were told by the medics to stop smoking. And they were told on the surgical ward to make sure they'd stop smoking. So they were told in the rehab to make sure they'd stop smoking. But no one told them what to do with their cravings, so they ate. So I wrote a diet sheet. This is all part of, I suppose, putting connecting dots, which I think I'm probably quite good at. Connecting dots to go, well, actually, if we gave them an information sheet when they came in post-MI after their heart attack, we could give them some information to stop them putting on that weight, which would be really helpful for them because losing weight's never easy. But it took a year to get approved. And I found that really frustrating that something so simple that was already written because I'd done it couldn't just get printed and approved. It was bonkers. So I moved. I found that very frustrating. And I knew if I worked in a private company rather than the NHS, I'd probably be able to make an impact more quickly. So I moved to life sciences. I moved to pharmaceuticals, and all of my training, my clinical perspective, as well as all the background in physiology and everything, was great for going and talking to healthcare professionals. And the training in the company was brilliant. So that's where I decided I wanted to be. I did lots of different roles, but a lot of it was in training because I just loved being able to impart that knowledge, translate complex science and make it understandable, which is part of what you did as a dietitian with each patient. But I did it in groups then as well, or with teams.
So do you think that was kind of a first reinvention in a way, that you moved out of the NHS working directly with patients? I mean, how much did you have to kind of change your thinking or your perspective in a way to work in the private sector in pharmaceuticals? And when did you become the trainer? I mean, that sounds like a few reinventions in a way.
Yeah, there's probably been a few there. I think it's very different working for a private company rather than a public one. And working as a sales rep, which was my first role, which is really you're just going to discuss the clinical potential of the drugs, of the medicines. It's not like you're selling them, but you have to be independent, self-motivated. You need to be able to get off your backside and get out there. And we had call rates, but you weren't in an office. You were literally working from home. Working from home has never been unusual because it's what I did when I was in pharmaceuticals. Anyone out in the field is used to working from home and organising themselves. So whereas it's new to a lot of people post-COVID, that's what I'd often done. So there's probably the biggest differences, and the culture, getting things changed. And I think there's probably less hierarchy and more cross-collaboration, cross-functional collaboration.
What pharmaceuticals were you selling at that point? Were you working with? Because this was pre GLP-1s and, what we have now,
Yes,
I
it was.
presume.
This is last century. So they hadn't even been licensed then. There was a whole range. So there's some HRTs for women's health. There was things for different dermatology indications. So a whole range of different medicines. And then I moved into psychiatry as well, which was fascinating. So the company I was in had the first, it's called atypical antipsychotic. So it's one that didn't cause a lot of traditional side effects, that actually, if you saw someone with schizophrenia walking down the street, it was their hunch and their rolling tongue that would give away there was something wrong with them. But that was the side effects of the traditional drugs. So the one that we had was the first atypical one that didn't cause those side effects. That was a fascinating one to work with and go into locked wards and even forensic units and prisons with that one.
Way outside your nutritional starting point.
It is. It's very different. I mean, it's still a baseline of physiology, science, treating a condition, and what are the alternatives for healthcare professionals to treat that condition, so you can have a good conversation with them about it and be able to give them all the information they might want about side effects, dosage and things like that. That's what we're trained to do. And then I moved into, so I'd done some training in between different roles. I'd been a field trainer, and then I'd gone into head office training. Then I moved into a field management role with the mental health team.
So, Helen, we've looked at your professional life. What was happening in your personal life during these periods?
Well, I got married. I always wanted to be a mum. I did get married. I met my husband on a small Caribbean island, which was a really odd, chance meeting. We had 2 children, but in my mid-years, we just knew that marriage wasn't going to last. He'd been made redundant twice. I'd taken some time out to work part-time as a dietitian, so I'd left pharma after a redundancy and gone back to my dietetics, just part-time around the small children. He was made redundant twice and one of us had to pay the mortgage. And it ended up being me. And the marriage didn't last, unfortunately. But I was made redundant 3 times. So I was the sole breadwinner for the kids. So it was a big responsibility, long hours. Some days I was going to one company that was north on the M25. Other times I was going south to another company that was on the M25. Those were all reinventions because it's a massive shock, especially your first one, because the company's restructuring. They've decided they need to reduce roles rather than individuals. And that's it in a lot of cases. And you don't have any say. So I was always the representative for the people who were being made redundant. I always did that little bit of fighting for us whenever I could to make sure it was fair. But each time was a reinvention because you're moving to a different company with a different culture and a different network of people to engage and build trust with, different products. And if I'm training them, I wanted to be really good and know those products inside out. I wanted to know the science. I wanted to know the patients. I wanted to know who would benefit, who they shouldn't be used for, and what alternatives there were. So I didn't realize, I think, how emotionally that it took out of me. If I'd had a coach then, it would have made a world of difference. Because it wasn't until I got a coach and we went back through my childhood, part of some work I was doing on a dent course with Daniel Priestley. And it was like, go back and look at your story. My childhood had always been about responsibility and looking after the house and looking after my mum who had ME and looking after my sister. And it was very rigid. It wasn't a focus on the children type of childhood. It was a fit into what the adults want type of childhood. And I'd never been even put first. And when you started tallying it all up, it was a really interesting exercise that I did, that the boys set us to do. That made me realize that childhood, you think you know who you are from your childhood, but you're not necessarily that person. It's just that level of influence and finding out who you really are and who you really want to be, I think, is one of the most empowering things you can do for your own self-worth, happiness, and just feeling okay with yourself.
Was this like a sort of sudden revelation that came to you when you were doing this work, these exercises, or did it take a long period of adjustment?
No, I had a coach at the time. I'd done my coaching qualifications then, and I still met with my coach partner every week. She's in California, and we still meet every week and talk, and it's amazing. Went through it with it, and it's almost like I'd cut those memories out. So when you're almost forced to go, well, what did lead me here? How did I get here? And there's lots of questions about your childhood. And it's like, wow, those answers aren't the ones I want to remember, to be honest. And I think why I was so determined to be a different mum as well for my kids. And I think it's also why psychological safety and trust is such an important part of the foundation of me and my clients. Because that's where honesty is. And if we're going to understand what drives people's behaviours, not just what are you eating, but actually what's beneath that? What are the stresses? What are the dynamics? What are the beliefs that we've held from childhood? We need that level of trust and safety to be able to do that. So a lot came out of it, but not necessarily what I wanted my story to be.
So Helen, I know that you started your own business in 2017. How did you take that leap? Because that's always, I think, a major reinvention when you go from being employed, even if you've been made redundant 3 times, to actually starting your own business.
And we didn't even talk about being a mum as a reinvention either, because that's a whole reinvention in itself, isn't it? But yeah, that was my final redundancy. And it's just, I had loved that role, and it was strategic and it was involved in change management. And there was no other roles like it that I could find anywhere. There was a lot of guilt from the team, really apologising that they'd had to make me redundant. And the director took me out for lunch and he went, just set up on your own, Helen, you'd be brilliant. And that's just the nudge I needed, because that's what I'd always wanted to do, but never really believed that I was good enough to do it. And I thought, well, I've been paid some money, so what have I got to lose? There's no job out there I want to do. People contacted other people for me, and I put something on LinkedIn and someone else did, my website and my logo. And I had so much help from lovely people, and I just got work. So
I'm sure it did feel risky, but it fell into place quite quickly by the sound
it
of
did
it.
fall into place. I think I was really, really lucky. I think the riskier things were the redundancies where I felt I had no control. And what was I going to do to pay the mortgage? Just sitting there thinking, I'm going to have to sell the house. But I really wanted to keep the house for the stability for the kids. That was my main driver there.
You've also said that when you started your own business, one of the big important parts of that was that you were finally able to have dinner with your children in the
That
evening.
meant the world. It honestly, honestly meant the world. I bulk cooked every week. We always had stuff in the freezer. So when I wasn't there, they could still have like a home cooked meal, but actually I could eat it with them rather than just getting it out of the freezer for them. And the other thing I did was within the year, I'd got 2 rescue dogs, and I'd always wanted a dog, and my parents wouldn't let me have one and my husband wouldn't let me have one. And it's like, yes, I've done it. I've done it. So yeah, and things like that. It's just when you've wanted things for so long and they've been, you can really feel it here. It's really important to be able to get there.
So it really sounds like this was the major reinvention, having your own business, running your life on your own terms. Did it kind of change you as a person when you felt that kind of ability to control things, the kind of level of happiness that started flowing into your life?
No, I think doing my coaching qualifications, being in training, being a field manager, a leader, you'd always had coaching type conversations. But actually, when you do your coaching qualifications and you're looking at psychology led principles and things, you go to whole different levels. And the depths of conversations that I was having with people, with leaders, with teams as well. I did a lot of leadership team coaching. It's just, that's what I really love. That's when I was my happiest, when I can really make that difference. And I've got a group of people in a room together or someone there, and I know they want something and I know where they are. And it's like, I know I can get you there, and you don't believe you can, but we will. We absolutely will. And that's what we need sometimes, isn't it? Is someone who believes in us more than we believe in ourselves, and just asks you the right prompts and gives you the right support to be able to bridge that gap.
That's the perfect coach. In 2025, so only last year, you actually pivoted your career again, and you've got your first book coming out very shortly. But what changed? What did you pivot to, and why?
The weight loss injections became more popular, and because of my background, I'd worked in metabolic diseases, in type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, cardiovascular disease, and I'd also worked in women's health. People started asking me about them. They wanted to know whether they were safe. They wanted to understand more about them. They might have relatives on them that were having side effects. And I was always really passionate about the GLP-1s when they were licensed for type 2 diabetes, because there was no other treatment like it for patients at the time, where they could actually lose some weight rather than a drug being weight neutral, or they're gaining weight on it. And people just said, God, you're so passionate. You come alive when you talk about it. So I started looking at it. I started one myself, and my close friend who's a GP started at a similar time. And I realized very quickly that the information and the advice out there hasn't caught up with the science. We're still treating weight as if it's just almost like a Barbie doll with some extra blue tack blobbed on that makes the scales heavier. But actually, it affects our whole biology. And it affects your appetite and your hunger and your satiety and loads of, even the absorption of your nutrients, when you're carrying weight that affects your health and causes inflammation. And people don't know this. So it doesn't matter the quality of your diet. It's not about ultra processed food. It's just you're not going to absorb the same if you're carrying a lot of weight. And the way the journalists talk about it, what people believe they're doing is right. They're so motivated to be able to make this the last time because they've cycled so many times that I wanted to be able to support them. And putting it out on social media was never going to be able to do the job because there's too many complexities and interactions with what our body does when it's healthy, what happens when we struggle with obesity, but then the belief side of that as well. Because if you were put on your first diet when you were 8, as many women were, because their mums, they wanted to make sure that they fitted in with this sort of 70s type skinniness, that stays with you. That stays with you. That is really just your puberty beginning in a lot of cases. People weren't overweight, but their mums took them to Weight Watchers. So I think beliefs is such a large part of that. And that isn't looked at in normal weight management, particularly. And then there's the behaviors that is so much more than calories and that can affect the inflammation in the body. And that includes sleep. It includes reducing stress and all sorts of things. So people are told it's their fault, that they as an individual need to eat less and lose more, and they've tried that. So there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of guesswork, and there's a lot of fear that people are going to fail, especially when the newspapers are just plastering that people regain all the weight afterwards. Well, that's what happens if you withdraw a drug and don't work on all your behaviours and your beliefs, That's what that shows. So that's why I wrote the book.
I have a personal kind of interest in this because 2 years ago I went onto a GLP-1. I actually didn't know that was a thing. I hadn't had, certainly, I was very, very skinny as a child, and I didn't start putting on weight even through 2 pregnancies until I had an early menopause in my mid-40s. And so my perception of myself was always I'm a very slim person. And then as I started putting on weight in my 40s, I wasn't, and that was really uncomfortable. I felt like I was showing up in the wrong body. I started trying to lose weight occasionally and then gave up and thought, well, this is just the way it is now. I'm getting old. And then GLP-1s came out and I wasn't feeling great. I tried to pretend I was fine, but actually I had gone on to blood pressure pills. I was on statins. I was not able to walk as far. I was starting to ache. And so I thought, I did as much research as I could and I went onto it, and over 18 months I've lost 5.5 stone, and I've been 6 months plateauing, and it's absolutely fine. That's where I want to be. It's just been a wonderful kind of reinvention transformation for me. And I know some people have side effects. I didn't have any, at least not bad ones, all good, loss of inflammation, just feeling so much more energetic and all that. So, but there is so much shaming out there as if, you've cheated in some way. People say don't cheat, don't put all those chemicals in your body. I've seen people say, in 10 years' time you'll wake up and be dead, or something terrible will happen to you. It's so easy for people who have not experienced being overweight to think that it is people's fault. They are just lacking in willpower or greedy or whatever it is.
I know. So because if your body is suddenly telling you to eat more, because that's what happens when your systems get dysregulated. But people don't realise that. They know they're hungry. They know they want more food. They know they can't stop, but they don't realise it's actually something happening in their body that is creating that drive. So that takes away a whole load of guilt to begin with, I think. There's the whole conversations about your cheating. Although they were licensed for people with type 2 diabetes originally, and that was 2005 that the FDA licensed Byetta, which is the one I worked on, the next one, which was the weekly one by Jurian, then these have been out a long time. We've got a lot of information. What we don't have the information on is the higher doses of some of them. And now they're becoming dual agonists and triple agonists. So there's more than one ingredient in them, in layman's terms. Then we don't know long-term what might happen there. But in the basic GLP-1s, we know what's happening. And I think what you've done is amazing. And I'm so pleased for you. And you did it at a low dose. And that's where I see a lot of people going wrong. They're so determined to block out the hunger and the food noise that they go to a dose that's too high. And then they can't eat enough to actually maintain their body either calories or nutrition wise, and they feel cold, they get more side effects, they don't have the energy to train or to walk, like you're saying. And those are all telltale signs. And this is just, it's very basic information in a lot of cases. But when we don't understand how our bodies work, then we don't know that. Everything that goes wrong is just put down to the drug. And it's like, well, no, you might have had gallstones before you started the drug and now you've lost weight, so you've got a higher risk. So there's so many components that I want people to understand. And menopause is where our estrogen levels start dropping and our insulin resistance starts increasing so that our body shapes change. She says, grabbing her waist.
Yes. It's very nice to have a waist again, I must say.
I know. It's so healthy.
Your book, everything you say is, very much music to my ears. I love the fact that, a professional is saying this is a good thing to do. It's a safe thing to do. These drugs are a positive way to lose weight. When you see online, I suppose it's really just people selling their services, an awful lot of professionals saying, don't do it that way. Come and work with me. You don't need the pharmaceuticals and all that sort of things. But tell us about the book. And I love the title. It was never about willpower. That rings so true.
Yeah, for me, that says it all. And the first chapter is It Was Never About Willpower. So the subtitle is The Women's Guide to Weight Loss on a GLP-1 to free you from the guesswork, the guilt, and the fear of failing. Because there's really meeting people where they are now to then take them on the journey to go to just explain, and some body literacy. So it's not going to be a beach read, and there are some exercises there. It's, highlight whether this applied to you, because then it goes into this is what the GLP-1 can change. So if you've pulled out what was applicable to things that you struggled with, like you said, you couldn't walk as far, you ached. I used to enjoy a little sleep at the weekends because I didn't have the energy. It's all those sorts of things that it really helps take them on a journey and show them that their body is different to everyone else's. So you can't go online and go, we're BMI buddies, because your body might have gained weight at a different age, weight cycle, different amounts. You've got a different metabolic memory. You've got different beliefs that you grew up with. And I want people to really appreciate this is a personal journey, and they've got lots of choices. They don't have to restrict themselves by just restricting calories, and give them lots of tools to support them. And for those who are seriously thinking about it or on it, I'm not selling GLP-1s or going out there saying everyone should be on it. And I think there's a flip side. Eating disorders units are seeing an increasing number of people who are getting them on a black or grey market, coming in with anorexia. Schools are getting in touch with people as well to say, can you do something here? Because the skinny trend is just taking over schools. And whether that's boys as well as girls, I don't know. But if we could move the conversations about weight to health rather than what people look like, that would be a step in the first direction. And I'd love to be able to make a difference, because this is so multifaceted that I'd love to be able to create change. I'm on a real soapbox.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure your book will create change. It's just so affirming to have something so positive out there for that particular. You say it's just for women who are thinking, I think that's probably a massive market. I don't think that's a just, tiny niche market. I think there are lots of people out there who think about it and worry about whether they should, and take on board that it might, somehow damage them, or they are cheating in some way. And I think lots of people, including celebrities as it happens, just won't admit that they've used GLP-1s to lose weight. And I think that's sad.
I wonder if that's for vanity rather than health. There's definitely different conversations to be had as to why people might be injecting or choosing to inject a GLP-1. I also think the conversations are getting confused. I read something yesterday about GLP-1s aren't going to change the obesity epidemic. Well, no, you wouldn't say blood pressure tablets are going to change the blood pressure epidemic, would you? You'd look at lifestyle and the things that cause the high blood pressure. So we need to split those conversations as well about what is causing obesity in the first place, and then recognise it as a disease and treating it as a separate conversation. And they're getting very, very muddied.
That's so interesting. So, Helen, you've had some remarkable transformations, and I love the fact that you are enabling other people to have transformative reinventions in their life, because I really feel that, serious weight loss and taking yourself back to health and feeling good about yourself as well is a wonderful reinvention and really transformative. I usually ask, if there's somebody on the verge of change, what would your advice be? But actually, I'm going to ask you specifically if there are people out there with a weight problem who would love to change, but, are anxious about, for example, taking a GLP-1 or taking that first step, what would your main piece of advice be to them?
Other than buy my book.
That too, that first, of course.
It's not out till July. I think look at the why. Why is that so important to you? What difference would it make to you to lose that weight? And what difference would it make to the people you love for you to lose that weight as well? Because I know when I listen to the stories of people who have chosen, then the difference that it makes is whether it's sitting on the swings in the park with their kids, whether it's being able to run around after their kids or get down on the floor and play with their grandkids, put their wedding ring on again. That they haven't worn in years. Go to theme parks with the kids and fit on the rides. There are so many sitting on a plane without a seatbelt extender so they can fly without that embarrassment. The lists are massive, and those are day-to-day differences that those people feel. But imagine how it would feel if you could know that your blood pressure was being managed, that the chances are your cholesterol was reducing, even reducing the risk of metabolic cancers potentially. That hasn't been proven yet through any research, and the book is very much based on research and evidence. But we know it goes one way, so if you're reducing the risks, the same way that it reduces the risks of type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, and cardiovascular disease, what are the differences that would make? And then I think you're getting into a deeper question, then that's a lot of money for me to lose weight. And I know not everyone can afford it. And that brings us into a whole different category of whether people can afford them or not, but that's a different conversation.
And that's really, really good advice. And thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your reinvention stories. It's been an amazing life, and all the very best with the book. I will get a copy as soon as it's out, and I'm sure it will change lives and enable reinventions in other people. And your own story is fascinating too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was lovely to be here and have the conversation.
Thank you so much again, Helen Bligh, for sharing your own reinvention stories and also the work you're doing now to bring the reinvention of effective weight loss to women who are navigating life-changing treatments, armed with little more than anonymous social media advice, fear, and decades of dieting beliefs that no longer match the emerging evidence. I really look forward to reading your book. It Was Never About the Willpower, The Women's Guide to GLP-1 Weight Loss, and it explores the science, psychology, and lived experience behind modern weight loss and women's health. Can't wait for it to be released on July the 7th. And for more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all of them. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. My unspellable and unpronounceable names means that I am the only Lucy McCarraher on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.